Welcome everyone to our virtual cooking class. We hope you have an interesting evening with us. Um, uh, we're here from the island of Gozo. Gozo is the sister island of Malta. And from our little bistro, Maldonado Bistro, apart from a restaurant, we also host some cooking classes, wine tasting, and other types of gastronomic experiences for people to share on their visit to the island. Tonight, I'm going to be assisted by one of my chefs here at Maldonado, one of our brilliant chefs, James.
Hi there, how's it going?
And of course, we've discussed together and come up with this menu to try to give you a bit of a taste of Malta. We've tried to do something which is practical, okay, in a 3-course format. So this is something you can prepare tonight and hopefully enjoy for your nice Saturday night at home. And of course, we've also tried to keep it on a vegetarian theme. But of course, yes, we can also give some suggestions for anybody who would like to pimp up the recipes in other alternative dietary preferences. Okay, so we have 3 recipes today. We have a starter, which we're going to start off with a soup, which is chestnut, as a chestnut soup, something typical here in Malta in the winter months. Follow that, we're going to do a pork, sorry, not a pork, but a pumpkin pie, a pumpkin and rice pie. Very typical recipe style of cooking, especially here in Gozo. Here in Gozo, we love our pie. We love doing pies. And we're going to be finishing it off with how I'm going to say, an innovation on a traditional Christmas time spiced chocolate, hot chocolate drink in Malta called Imbuljuta. But instead, we're going to do it as a baked chocolate custard. Apart from that, of course, as you know, all recipes take a number of time, and we have to decide on the order of the recipes. Some recipes take a few times, some take a lot, and we have to make our decisions on what to do first. For us, of course, you know, you're cooking at home, you want to sit down with your family and friends, and the last thing you want after your main course is that you have to go off back to the kitchen and start cooking again. So my recommendation, and I guess you agree with me, James.
Recording in progress.
Your recommendation, I assume that you also agree with me, James, is that the best thing is to start off with dessert. Okay, so we're going to start off with dessert, get that done and dusted, and then we'll move on to the soup and then to the pie. Okay? After each recipe, of course, we'll give a small opportunity for anyone who has any questions on that particular recipe. And as Alice had pointed out, even at the end, we'll try to leave ample space for some questions that you also might have. Okay, cool. So, James, you want to talk about your innovation on our Maltese Imbuljuta?
The Imbuljuta, it comes from a traditional Gozitan sort of drink they have around Christmas time. It's like a hot chocolate drink, thickened with chestnuts, spiced with orange and cardamom, cloves, stuff like this. And what we've done is we've actually deconstructed those elements. So on the base, we have like a roasted chestnut cream. Sitting on top of that will be a spiced chocolate custard. And then just to finish that off, we've got some candied orange. So here, I've just prepared a quick stock syrup. And will be, that's just 50% sugar, 100% water in that. I'm just going to want to bring that up to the boil.
Sugar, water, syrup, to boil it up, and the candied oranges.
Yeah. I'm just going to take the orange here, and you see here, what I've done is I've reserved the tips, and we'll see why in a second. I'm just going to sit them into the syrup and just let them simmer away nicely. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is get my butter roasting for these chestnuts. You want that like Christmas market sort of aroma from this, those roasted chestnuts on a fire, you know. So you want to get a nice good colour on these, and just to fill the room with that aroma.
And just a side note on the chestnuts. So obviously, in the recipe guidelines, we had of course instructed for people to have pre-cooked chestnuts. Obviously, from one country to another, there's different things that are accessible on your supermarket shelves, on your grocery shelves. I know that some places might have whole chestnuts, so those you'd have to roast and peel and then break down as we did. Sometimes you'll find dehydrated chestnuts, which again, you might need to hydrate in hot water, boil them, and then break them out. Or else you might conveniently find just cooked chestnuts, either in a can or in a pre-pack to use. So you have to, of course, we have to adapt from one place to another. Obviously, pre-cooked items like this obviously are designed to offer convenience at home. Okay, for people who don't want to go through the hassle of roasting and peeling. Okay, so can you do the recipe?
So as I'm bringing these the oranges up just to a gentle simmer, I'm just going to start to prepare our chocolate custard.
Yep.
So what we have here is some spices. We have cinnamon, cloves, cardamom, and a little bit of ginger powder. And you can see here I've just reserved the trimmings from the orange just to give it that extra boost of spice in there. So that,
Exactly, and those will be the classical elements of the traditional Imbuljuta. So the spices, the cinnamon, and the orange. Okay, apart from the chocolate.
So that will bring into a pan with 250 grams of cream, 250 grams of milk, and our 250 grams of dark chocolate, just broken up into small pieces there. Just get that ready. Sorry, George, what have I done there?
Okay. And maybe we can also explain to the guests who are viewing, because obviously you'll find different types of recipes. So I don't know, for example, if you go to Spain, you find a crema catalana. They like to make their custards with milk.
Yeah.
But of course, if you go to France and you find a creme brulee, they'll basically just use fresh cream. Here
Yeah.
you've decided to use a half and half, milk and cream.
Yeah, so it just lightens up that custard a little bit with the addition of the milk. We don't want it to be too heavy. With the addition of the chocolate and the fat inside of that, we need to try and have a balance, so it's not just sitting on your stomach like really horrible just after your meal. So we're just going to start to bring that up now. That'll go on the back, just on a low simmer, please, George. So we just want to bring up this chocolate nice and gently, this chocolate cream.
So just to catch up with anyone who's cooking live from home, you'll have 3 burners going on at the moment. So you're going to have one pan sauteing the chestnuts. You have another pan preparing the custard, so the milk, the cream mixture. And you'll have another pan caramelizing, candying the oranges. Okay. Just give a chance to everyone to catch up.
Yeah.
Okay, and then obviously what you're going to do is with the custard, with the cream mixture, you're going to add in the eggs and the sugar.
Yes. So what I need to do now here is I need to whip together my eggs. Sorry, George. My eggs and sugar. So here I have 12 egg yolks, and the eggs act just as a setting agent for this custard. We have 200 grams of sugar here, and we're just going to whip that together, nice and light. Get a nice light texture on that.
And in this recipe, we won't use the egg whites.
No. So what we have been doing here at Maldonado, we have been serving the macaroons, some almond macaroons, alongside our Imbuljuta, and that's just for us a good way to use up the egg whites that we have left over. So obviously we don't want to be throwing half the egg in the bin.
Exactly. So we use the egg whites to sort of make sort of like meringues, little almond-based meringues to complement as a biscuit with the custard. Very good. Okay. Also, just a side note, while James is preparing, of course, custard, and while you're continuing off in the kitchen, also you might ask also like, why chestnuts, why Maltese? Because even sometimes with a traditional recipe, not necessarily this mean that the ingredient actually comes from Malta. So in the case of chestnuts, they are not grown in Malta. They're basically come off trees in abundance, especially in Northern Europe and places like Germany. And here in Malta, my interpretation of it is it was more seen as a delicacy, that in the winter time they bring in these chestnuts from the north of Europe and it'll be seen as delicacies. Obviously nowadays restaurants and food culture, now maybe chestnut is not seen as a delicacy, maybe it might be oysters, caviar, or or I don't know, or maybe truffles. Okay, but we're talking about recipes that have been up a while back, maybe coming around 100 to 100 years.
Right, so as you can see here, my chocolate's just starting to come up. And you just want to keep that. You just want to keep that moving, just so your chocolate won't catch on the bottom of the pan. Just to get a nice emulsification in there, and you see all the spices going, infusing there. Lovely. We've got here is our nice roasted chestnuts and our beurre noisette. So you do want to get a really nice colour on these. It's what sort of makes the dish. You know, they complemented the roasted nuts against this chocolate, against the spices. If you don't take these nuts far enough, it's not going to have that same sort of like toasty effect there, basically.
But I assume you also want to get this caramel, this brown butter effect, no?
Yes,
So
yes. So there we go. And I'm just going to add in now my cream and bring that up just to reduce. And what I'm doing here, I mean, with this, as I see with any recipe, it's very much open-ended. And I would look at every recipe as a guide, really. So with this, you could puree that into the base of the cup. Here, I'm just going to keep these chestnuts whole, just so you have a little bit of texture going through that. I just want to reduce that cream down a little bit. And this custard is ready to go once that's all up to the boil. Switch that off. Sorry, George. Grab this sieve, and you just want to strain all those spices out. Okay. So we've got that there.
I'll take that for you.
And then you whisk these eggs together.
And obviously you need to be quite quick to make sure you don't overcook the eggs.
That's it. So now that we've got our chestnuts looking like that, nicely infused into the cream, we're just going to divide those against our 8 cups. We're using coffee cups here, but any ramekin you have at home will do just fine. It's just where we have been serving this dish, it comes from an inspiration of making a custard from English breakfast tea. So I'm British and got a bit homesick here in Malta, and decided to come up with a dish celebrating the. How would you call it, George? The
English tea
yeah,
and biscuit.
Tea and biscuits. Celebrating the tea and
time,
biscuits.
tea time.
That's it. So we just had an adaptation on that, and that's how we've ended up with our Imbuljuta here. Now we're just going to ladle our mixture into here, into these cups.
Looking delicious, James.
Well, it's chocolate, George. It's quite hard. It's quite
You
hard
can't
to
go wrong. You can't go wrong.
to make that gross. Ooh.
Okay, very good. So basically, we're going to ladle up the cups with the custard, with the chocolate custard. As we said, we've spiced it with the cinnamon, the oranges, and the ginger. We've put in the chestnut cream in the bottom, topping it up with the chocolate mixture, and then that will be transferred to the oven. And we've preheated the oven to what temperature?
So we're going for 95 degrees.
Okay.
On a fan setting. So obviously, if you don't have a fan oven, 110 should do you perfectly. And you just want to take it, just so you have a gentle wobble in the middle of these cups, because obviously you don't want it too runny. And if you cook it too hard, it's just going to be have a texture like scrambled eggs.
A bit dense and eggy.
Yes, exactly.
No? Very good.
So just a tight, small wobble in the middle, and we'll go through that later once we're cooked.
Okay, and now we've of course prepared our tray here. We've also put in a bit of water in the tray, so we want to cook this in a bain-marie. It's a classic kitchen technique where we try to help to create consistent heat around the cups, okay, around the tins.
That's it. So just to clean up these cups a little bit here. We'll see if you're cooking for your own at home. I wouldn't be too worried about this, but in a restaurant setting, we just want to keep these cups nice and clean.
And keep the critics happy.
That's it. That's it. Okay.
And here, in a nutshell, in a few minutes, we've put together our first one out of 3 courses. We've got a dessert. Now James is going to load it up in the oven, and that's out of the way. Of course, this can be something you can prepare in the morning if you like, or even the day before. No, James?
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily need to do this before your dinner, before your meal. It can be done in the morning. It can be done the day before. I'm sorry, let me get out of the way.
So that I've just put on for 45 minutes there. Right.
And that's one out of the way.
That's it. That's that done.
Very good. So, dessert done. Now off to our second recipe, which is the first recipe in our set menu for today. We're going to do the soup. So, the soup, James, if you can go through the ingredients.
Yeah.
George?
Yes, of course. Yes, tell me, Alice.
I've got a quick question.
Yeah, of course.
Hi.
Sorry.
I wants to know whether, that's okay. Someone's wondering whether that dessert is on the menu at your restaurant at the moment.
It was actually on our menu at Christmas time. So we try to change our menu on a regular basis. And this was actually a dish which we were doing in December. It's sort of a Christmas style dessert. And we were doing it for our wine tastings and also for our a la carte menu on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So let's say it this way: even though we live on an island, we try to keep the pace going, and we don't like the things to stay boring in the kitchen, if you understand what I mean. Never a boring day here at Maldonado. No?
No.
Very good. Any other questions, Alice?
Another one. Can you explain what the name of the dessert is in English?
Well, Imbuljuta is the traditional name here in Malta. I don't know that there's a particular English name for it. Certain names come from, I don't know, from dialect, even sometimes from maybe Arabic origins, I would believe, the Imbuljuta. But not that it has an English name. I don't know, for example, we have a soup which is called soppa tal-Armla, which we call widow soup in English. So, but in the case of the Imbuljuta, for example, not that I know that there's an English name for it.
No.
So we haven't discovered it yet.
That's it.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so we move on to the next recipe.
All good.
So here James has prepared as the brief on our ingredient list of all the ingredients for our soup, and of course just to understand a bit of texture, but also design. So as you know, a soup, sometimes common mistakes in home cooks is you see a recipe and you just pile it up in the pan and just keep it boiling.
Yeah.
We need to develop flavor. So obviously James has chopped things in a specific way through design on how we want to present the end product. Okay, so the end product, the soup, but also how he's going to do his part also to develop flavor by sautéing things one thing at a time.
For me, George, it's also about how to sort of to play with textures.
Yep.
Really. So for something as simple as this recipe might sound, having like a sort of vegetable soup with chestnuts. What we want to do is try and make each of those vegetables have a unique sort of flavour profile, a unique texture, so that every spoon as you're going in there is slightly different. So what I'm doing here is I'm just quickly sauteing off some diced shallots, some diced local shallots. We just want to take them till they're a little bit translucent, but I don't want to cook them all away because I want to have a little bit of bite in there.
And at the end of the day, all the vegetable ingredients are a part of a base of a classic mirepoix. I mean, you know, basically celery, carrot, a bit of garlic, the shallots or onion. No, so in reality, it's the base of any great soup. But of course, the mastery of the chef, the person cooking, is building that how to saute things one thing at a time.
That's it. If you can see the vegetables in the pan getting a little dry, what you can do is just add a little pinch of salt in there, and that is just going to take some of the moisture out of the vegetables and start to sweat them down nicely. Okay.
And of course, with any ingredient in particular, so veg, the celery, the onion, lot of ingredients have water, what we refer as water content. So the sautéing part of that process is basically trying to get that water out, okay, and trying to get the natural sugars to come out of the actual vegetable. And of course, that will help to develop flavor and that caramelization. Is it correct to say it's like the Maillard effect?
The Maillard effect. Yeah? Yes. So that is the sugars.
Because everyone refers to it always in a meat texture in a context, but actually in the same thing in vegetables as well.
That's it. Okay, so now that I'm nice and soft, I can see that these onions are starting to get quite translucent. But they're not by any means fully cooked. And as well, the garlic is just about 70% there, I'd say. We're just going to add our celery now. Which again has been diced just as the shallots. Just give that texture, because you don't really, with celery especially, you don't want to have too big of a dice, because you have those astringent sort of molecules going through, which can get a bit bitty for the end product. So we just want to take them off, just dice them down nice and small.
Well, it already smells great, James.
That's it.
It's a shame we can't transfer that with the camera.
It's the classic onion and garlic combo.
You can never go wrong.
Huh? That's it. So now we're just going to take our carrots there, just into the pan, and just start to get that going. Oh, last one.
That one escaped.
That's it.
And here, I mean, till now, we have the classic base of any classic
soup,
vegetable soup.
broth,
So
stocks.
okay. Now, of course, in a case, let's say in this case, we decided out through design, we wanted to do the recipe vegetarian. So we we decided to use a vegetable stock and not put any meats. If anybody wants to put in a bit of bacon, this is the time to put in the bacon. Actually, so
sorry, I will make that point now, George. So what we have here, and this is sort of the beauty of working in a restaurant, we do generate a lot of vegetable trim. Obviously, we don't want to throw that in the bin. We want to try and extract as much as we can from everything that comes through the door in the restaurant. So we've made our own vegetable stock. The stock cubes at home will be absolutely fine to use. But here, it's the beauty of working with food and with these products is you can try and extract as much as you can.
it's all about zero waste, James.
That's it.
So obviously, if you're going to use a stock cube, you might need to dilute it in some hot water. I know there's also these vegetable pots as well.
Yeah.
You might find a vegetable stock ready in a tub or in a bag. So it's really up to you what you have available to you. If you do have the time, of course, it would be great. Or even if you can, instead of putting in the vegetables in the compost box, maybe instead
freeze them down.
Exactly, and make your own stock from it.
Yeah.
No.
So now that all my vegetables are nice and soft, we've got some few different textures going on there. I'm just going to add my vegetable stock, and I'm going to reserve about 250 mils. I mean, you can eyeball this. It's not the third degree going on.
Well, at the end of the day, they can reduce it to what consistency they want it to.
That's it. So we're just going to add our potatoes here, just keeping them in water so they don't oxidize. And let's just keep that nice colour.
And I can say that here in Malta, we do love our potatoes.
That's it.
I think you've seen that, James.
Yes, yes. Oh, down. Okay. So once you've got your stock in, your potatoes, we're just going to add this chestnut puree, which we've made earlier, pre-prepared, and just let that.
So basically, you would have had the ready-made chestnuts, pre-cooked, and basically you just blitz them in a puree.
Yes. Just with a touch of oil, a little bit of water, just to help that come round.
Just to make a chestnut paste.
That's it. And we're just grating some nutmeg in there, just to get some depth into the broth, and just let that infuse
and elevate the nuttiness.
There you go. So from this point now, what we're trying to do is just cook these carrots and the potato down. So on the recipe it says we've got half an hour on a low simmer, but this all depends on how you've cut your vegetables. If you could grate them down, and it will take 5 minutes. You could put whole piece of potato in there, and it's going to take 40. And it's really just about looking and tasting at every point. And when you're happy with it, that's the time to take it off. There's no reason why.
There's no golden rule.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's very, very free flowing, and that's what I've always said to anybody, is that a recipe is always a guide.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a guide, and it's for you to champion it.
That's
all.
it. That's
so
it.
You have to own it, and of course cookbooks, and recipes you might find online. Yes, they're good for guidance. They give you, let's say, a pat, but then at the end of the day, it's really up to you on how you'd like to adapt it, and of course that's the beauty of cooking. Because recipes is a constant evolution, from generation to generation, from family to family. And of course, this is something we try to do here at the restaurant by celebrating the past, but also preparing ourselves for the future. So basically, the soup will of course simmer for a while. As you might have noticed, a lot of the veg has been perfectly diced, obviously showing James's classical training. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can chop at home and do your own diced vegetables. And of course, it's up to you on the end result, on how you would like the recipe, because I don't know, you might have kids at home and they don't want it chunky, so you just want to use a hand blender. So it's really up to you how you want to finish that. For us, of course, in a restaurant, we want to present it in a wholesome, rustic way. So obviously, when we're preparing the veg through design, we're already thinking about the end result, how we're going to plate it.
That's it. That's the process.
Okay. So Alice, I don't know if anybody has any questions on this recipe, on the soup. I hope we weren't too fast.
Do you have any questions for me? No, we've not had anyone requesting to repeat anything or catch up, so I think we're all good on the recipe.
Okay.
Do you have a question for you, James?
Oh, yes.
We'd love to know how long you've been cooking Maltese cuisine for.
So I arrived in Malta about 6 months ago. I came on holiday just to celebrate my friend's birthday and fell in love with the island, met George, and I've been here ever since. I started off looking after the private dining program here at Maldonado, and sort of learning about Maltese food with George's input, and really trying to bring a different offering to Gozo, I'd say. Since then, we've moved on, and I'm now in charge of menu development here, both here and at George's coffee shop, the Victoria Central.
Yes, because we also have a coffee shop and a coffee roastery as well. So we do quite a few things. It's all about gastronomy.
That's it.
You can see it here. So all loaded. But
and what about your favourite Maltese dishes to cook?
So for me, I would go with the local pastizzi. I don't know how many British English viewers we have at home, but it's essentially like a Greggs steak bake on supercharged. I'd say, you know, you've got super like crispy, flaky pastry, which we're actually using for our next recipe, our pumpkin pie with rice and peas. And it's just, it's encased with cheese. So you've just got like a cheese puff, crispy, flaky, it's absolutely gorgeous. And that is breakfast every morning pretty much.
And you already made your adaptation of it as well.
Yes, yes,
No?
yes.
Sometimes recipes happen by mistake.
Yes. So just moving on now to our pumpkin pie.
Can I switch the pans?
Yes, of course, yes.
Okay.
Put that there.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next recipe. So our third and last recipe, which will be our main course, which we're going to do our pumpkin pie.
Yeah.
So here in Gozo in particular, we have a tradition of pie. Ftira, so this is like a local style pizza, but it's made with either with a bread style dough, or a flaky pastry dough. Mm-hmm. And in the summer, of course, we enjoy that with like potato, anchovies, tomato. Okay, but also in the winter, when it's fall, it's pumpkin season. So obviously, in this is sort of an adaptation of a fall winter version of our local pie.
That's it.
We're going to be using a short crust pastry just to make it more convenient for our viewers. Okay, so for people at home, because it would be a bit complicated to explain off the cuff how to make the pastizzi dough, but we'll give you a small brief about the pastry. Okay, so actually James has prepared here a sample of the local pastizzi dough. You can actually see how layered it is. Okay, so this will be the traditional pastizzi, how layered it is with traditionally it was made with lard, but nowadays they use vegetable shortening for it. And of course it makes it very crispy and very light. But of course for the purpose of this class, we decided to use more simple and accessible for everyone to use a short crust pastry. Okay, in fall, of course, there's pumpkin is very popular here in Malta. So after the hot summer, we welcome the first rains in September and October. And lots of farmers in October, November, they'll have their pumpkin harvest, which is something which if you come to Malta and to Gozo and go for a walk in the countryside, you'll actually notice a lot of these farms, these farmhouses, all have these pumpkins lying on the roofs, soaking up the sun. Okay, and of course with it, it's very popular to make a pumpkin pie. And with the pumpkin pie, a basic source of carbohydrates, but also as a filler is also the rice. And we've decided to use some peas, to add a touch of green. But also here in Gozo, in particular, because of our topography and agricultural profile, now, let's say next month, February, March, we'll have the fava bean season. So of course that will be very popular, that instead of the typical pea, lot of people at home will be using the fava as a filler for their pies. Okay, so you sauteed the onions.
So I just want to make a quick note on the way that we're cooking these onions, because obviously we've sweated onions for our chestnut soup, and now we're going with the pumpkin. Now the reason why I'm taking these a little bit harder, trying to get that Maillard reaction that George was talking about earlier, to really celebrate that sweetness in the pumpkin, and that's just going to help bring that out. So next, now those have got a little bit of colour in them, I'm just going to reduce the heat slightly and add our finely diced garlic and just let that sweat in. You want that nice immediate hit of sweet garlic in the pan.
And also, so this is a common kitchen mistake, would be that people will just saute immediately the garlic with the onion, and not giving the time for the onion to develop on its own.
That's it. So there's different moisture content storage. There's different cooking times.
But I've seen this time and time again where people just chuck in the garlic from the beginning and then it burns, goes black, goes bitter.
Yes.
So again, another kitchen tip, to be a bit patient, and build things slowly.
So we've got that here. And now the reason why I have reserved some of my vegetable stock here is just with the nature of pumpkins and how they're grown, the different terroir they're grown in. The moisture content can vary from having a very dry pumpkin, like a delica, to going all the way to like a squash, which has quite high moisture content and can fall apart quite easily. So just to have a little pot of stock next to you, and you can always watch to see what you have at home. So now that we've got our garlic nicely sweated down, a nice sweet aroma coming from that, we're just going to add our pumpkin. And now again, as we were doing with our mirepoix for the chestnut soup, I just want to add a touch of salt there, just to try and get some of that moisture content out of that.
And you're using the local sea salt.
That's it, that's it.
So here in Malta and in Gozo, we are very popular for salt. If you go on the coast, on the north side of the Gozitan island, you'll find salt pans, which are there purposely to capture seawater and harvest sea salt. It's something. Let's say it this way: we don't it's the only salt we use at home. So while this is sautéing away, so the purpose here, of course, it's sautéing in the pan is not to cook through the pumpkin, but just to caramelize it and give it a bit of color on the outside. Correct?
Yes, yes. And we just want to slowly cook that pumpkin, and just remember that this pumpkin is going into the oven for about half an hour, so you can take it a little al dente in the pan, as I've done with the rice as well. I just want to reserve some of this for the lid.
And the short crust pastry contents.
Yeah, so it's a very, very simple short crust that we've made here, but any store-bought at home will do absolutely fine. Again, obviously the beauty of being in a restaurant is that we can make our own and change the variables just on how we want it to be. Again, don't worry too much about how.
Can I put these in?
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot that. Yeah,
I'll put that in as it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
All tied up. So we're going to put in some earthy herbs here. We have some rosemary and some thyme. Okay, and also a bit of bay leaf. Very common herbs, which plenty of people here in Malta would have in their back garden and accessible. And basically, we're going to keep them there to continue infusing with the pumpkin and the onion and the garlic. So here James has sorry.
Someone's asked whether there's a benefit to keeping the pumpkin in the sun.
Yes, there is. Basically, it's all about water content. It's like how I'm going to say. See, a lot of food spoils because of the water within. Now, obviously, if you can, it's all about hydrating. Actually, no, dehydrating.
Well, you're concentrating the nutrients as you're taking moisture content out, and with that, you're concentrating sugar content, which brings in more sweetness with the pumpkin, more flavour.
So obviously, this is something that benefits. Okay, it does benefit. Sometimes it doesn't benefit for Maltese agriculture. Here are tomatoes, will be very flavorful. Fruits like melon and watermelon will be very flavorful, but also because of the sun, because of our sun and our heat, and obviously all this produce has slightly, let's say, less water content. In the case of the pumpkin, yes, they would leave it on the roof. Sometimes I know some households which actually even buy onions by the box and just lay them in the shade in a roof as well, just to dry them as much as they can to enhance flavor. You don't have to only dry age beef, because everyone talks about dry aging beef, but the same concept can apply for plenty other ingredients as well. I mean, look at a simple raisin. How punchy and how strong a raisin is, or a sun-dried tomato. Why? Because you've just sucked out all that water content out of the grape or out of the tomato, and that's why it's so concentrated in flavor. And of course, in a kitchen, especially us in a restaurant environment, we're trying to always optimize and try to get the ultimate flavor out of the food. I don't know. We had a customer. She booked a table yesterday, and she said so many nice things about what did the chefs do in the food. It's so delicious and all that stuff. But it's because it's our job to get the best flavor out of the food that we're preparing. And of course, one of that thing is simply just managing this water content by sun drying things or drying them properly. So I hope I have explained that one.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Alice. So egg wash. You're gonna egg wash the pie case.
Egg wash the base of this pie case, George, just to avoid our it getting soggy bottom, really.
Because here in Malta we love it crispy.
Yes. Okay. Plenty in there, plenty around the sides.
So obviously, you're gonna have a lot of moisture from the vegetable stock, the pumpkin, the peas, the rice. All that will be steaming within the pie. So one way of making sure that we don't end up with a soggy bottom and it doesn't collapse when the pie cools down and get it out of the pan is by preparing this bit of an egg wash. Recipe by design. Okay, very good. So just also something as a side note. Obviously, we've done this pie with rice and pumpkin. So this is a typical fall winter version. In the summer, people but quite common. They'll use more summer ingredients like sun-dried tomatoes, capers, tuna. So in the beginning of summer, there's this tuna season, and then some households like to buy the fresh tuna and pickle it, and then use it as a filler for the pies. In August, we have the lampuki season. So lampuki is in the Pacific, they call it mahi mahi. Other places in Spain, I found that they call it yambuga. In Italy, they call it dorado. So it has different type of names. But in August, September, we'll have our lampuki season, which is another fish. And again, it will be used cooked and flaked as a filler for pies. So, here in Malta, we like our pies. It's really up to you, because once again, talking about our theme before, you have to own the recipe. So the recipe is just a guide. Maybe instead of peas, we could have used spinach. Maybe we could have put in a bit of kale. I don't know. Maybe right now, next month we'll have fava. We will be in season, so we will use fava. I don't know. Maybe some boiled artichokes. So really, it's really all up to you. All up to you how you want to fill the pie. And of course, this is the important thing of where a recipe comes from, because recipes come from ingredients that are accessible, in the place at the time.
At the time, that's it.
Yeah. Okay, so this is your lid. Okay, and again, we use long grain rice. So we used a basic white rice. If you want to use basmati, go for it. Okay, it wouldn't be traditionally Maltese, but it will still be a nice rice. If you want to use a wild rice, something whole grain, why not as well? In this case, we've used a white rice. Just a note on preparation. We prepared the rice, we boiled it, and we just rinsed it because we don't want all that starch. So we don't want it to be super sticky in the pie. We're not making sushi here.
So I'm just going to start to prepare our mix for the rice and the pumpkin pie. So just got our peas and rice there together, and these both have been chilled to like a fridge temperature, so that as we add our pumpkin in, we're good to go straight in with 2 eggs just to help bind that together. Our chopped sage there, because what it will do is just cool down that hot pumpkin, just going to get cooled down by the fridge cold peas and rice. And just allow us to go straight into the pie tin and straight into the oven.
So, for example, a classical version, so traditional version of this type of pie, apart from the pumpkin and the peas, would have been using that's our local pork sausage. So obviously, we decided to make it a vegetarian, to a vegetarian option. So obviously, you have to compensate that by how to develop flavor. So that's why we put it in the thyme, we put it in the rosemary, but we're still also putting in the sage as well. Even the vegetable stock also helps, because at the end of the day, you want to develop as much flavor as possible, because yes, maybe the pumpkin and the rice on its own can be a bit bland and boring. So, we need a bit of punch.
Yes, yes. So I can just feel here, pumpkin, it's probably about 70% there now.
Al dente.
Al dente. And what you want to do really is try and keep that, and take it a further 10%, because it's gonna, you have to remember, it's going to be cooking inside the pie case as well, and you don't want a mushy pie, because I feel like this is where lots of people go wrong with a vegetarian pie, is you just sort of have this sort of,
And overcook the veg.
yeah, like a claggy thing going on in the middle.
Because you want to compensate. You want a bit of a bite in it.
Exactly.
So, and sometimes, obviously, then this is when, of course, when maybe overcooking, then you lose the color. It won't be as bright, but actually start getting darker. No,
Yeah.
And of course, maybe not be so appealing.
So I'm just going to take my bouillon out, go in through the rice and peas there. Just give a nice mix, and you'll just see that takes it down to a temperature where if it was all hot and we added our eggs, the eggs would scramble immediately and you're left with a mess, and you throw it all at the kitchen sink.
Exactly, because basically the objective of the eggs in the recipe is to bind
it all together.
Not to overpower with flavor or texture. Okay. But I can already smell the sage.
That's it.
And
That's
the
it. It's just
rosemary
that
coming out as well.
that pumpkin hitting the sage. For me, they're best friends. Really, in any dish, sage and pumpkins always work for me. We're just taking them there.
As I said earlier, so today we've decided to use peas. Next month we'll use fava. It's in season. If we get some fresh spinach or some fresh kale, why not as well? So we need to love our greens.
Absolutely. So it may look a little dry, but what you have to remember is there's still a bit of moisture in that pumpkin that's going to come out as we cook it. And I'm just going to pop that into our ready-made pie case. Okay. So that's in there now, nice and full.
George, can I just check if there's anything cooking in the background that we need to be keeping an eye on, or is everything okay?
Basically, we have the soup going on. So the soup is simmering away. So until that is ready.
Yeah.
And on the back, we had the oranges, which were caramelizing in the sugar syrup.
Yes.
So that's all. And we have the custards in the oven, which are ready, James.
Yes, they just
they're ready in the meantime. Yeah, so they come out.
Now we're having some pastry problems, which is fairly normal for me. I'm sort of known for it.
It just makes it look rustic, James.
Exactly.
You want to make it look homemade.
Homemade. That's the point.
Mistakes included.
That's it. Okay.
Make it natural, James.
Yes.
We don't have to be perfectionists.
So we can just top that all back up with our leftover pastry. I mean, what's really important is you just want to have a nice encased pie. I mean, it's Saturday night. We're not going to cry about pumpkin pie.
No.
So
bring it on.
Bring it on. That's it. Okay. So just going to take our knife there. Just run that around the rim.
Anyway, the cracks can also serve as a way for the pie to steam as well.
That's it.
Instead
Exactly.
of poking it or...
That makes sense. We'll go with that. Okay. So now, imagine you've got a perfectly coated pie case there. We're just going to take our egg wash and go nuts.
So again, the egg wash is there to firm up the casing.
Yeah.
Okay, but it would also give a nice shine and color to the top, to the lid.
That's it.
And of course, this is where if you want to, I don't know, some people might like to put in some sesame seeds,
Yeah, just
maybe
top it
top
off
it
with
up, or
something.
maybe some
Poppy
fennel seeds or
seeds,
poppy.
yeah.
So it's really up to you. We encourage everyone to own the recipe and make it yours.
That's it. Okay, so now that's just going to go into our preheated oven at 200 degrees, and we're going to drop that temperature immediately to 180, and we're going to leave that in there for half an hour. Okay, just going to make a quick point on the wobble on these Imbuljuta here. So what we want there is just a slight, as you tap it, just a slight little thing going on. Nothing crazy, just there in the middle. You just want a little wiggle.
Exactly. So obviously that wiggle is something good. So some people might think, oh, it's not cooked enough yet. No, actually it is. And you have to also understand that when that's coming out of the oven, it will still continue cooking with the residual heat.
Yeah.
So one way of, let's say, ruining a nice custard, your creme brulee or your crema catalana is just basically overcooking the custard.
Yeah.
So that's something that you don't need to. If it's, you're going to do it in a big bowl and you're going to serve it, you might say, okay, you don't want it too loose, but it's in a cup. It's already individually portioned. So that cup and a spoon, dig in, no?
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to be overcooked at all.
No.
You've made quite a mess, James, here.
I do tend to do that, George.
Uh-huh. Well, he was working, so what can I say? You've been excused.
Yeah.
Huh? I'm sure anybody at home, of course, have their own cleaning as well. So,
Or hopefully somebody there to do it for you.
yeah. Okay. So anyway, Alison, any questions on the pumpkin pie?
Yes, we had a few coming in.
Yeah.
First of all, we've had someone who has vouched that the pastisi is far superior to a Greg's steak bake. So it's good to know.
You say? That's good. That's very good. Very good. James is gonna get banned from the island, I
So
tell
we
you.
have a question. When baking pies, what's the best way to stop from getting a soggy bottom on the pastry?
So it depends really what sort of mix you're using. If you have quite a wet mix, I would suggest blind baking your pastry. So that's with with baking beans, even dry beans.
But in simple home terms, what does blind baking mean?
Blind baking. So we've rolled out a base of the tart case there, and we've just filled that with some. You could even use dried pasta, dried rice, just to fill out the base of that tart case. And then cook the base of the case, and then brush that with egg whites or whole egg, and that's just going to set in the base and stop any moisture bleeding into that pastry, and give you a nice finished product.
But it's a tricky one. So
Yeah.
practice makes perfect. It's all about, because at the end of the day, even when you're blind baking, you have to be careful that you don't overcook the case.
Yes.
Because then it'd be a bit too crumbly, and you'll defeat the purpose by, for one extreme is being too soggy and it falls apart, but then the other one be too crispy and it falls apart as well.
Yeah.
So obviously it comes with practice and of course championing, the best way of doing it. But these are all kitchen tricks, which we learn trial by error. So
that's it.
No?
It's important to make mistakes.
Exactly. That's the only way we learn, by mistakes. No?
No.
Very good. Anything else, Alice?
Yes, we've got another question asking whether vegetarian dishes are common in Malta, or whether you kind of eat a lot more meat than vegetarian.
Okay, well, that's a tricky one. Well, we have plenty of produce. But yes, we do love our meat and we do love our fish. So you'll find, let's say the traditional pastizzi. The traditional pastizzi is it's made either with cheese or with a pea filling. The pea version of it is actually even vegan because you don't have the cheese in it. Other recipes you might find. The bigilla is vegetarian. The Maltese stira can be made vegetarian because you can get it without the anchovy on top of it. So even the traditional ravioli is another typical dish here in Malta, which is also vegetarian. So you'll find a few options. You'd find a few options, and of course, as you know, all everywhere, consumer trends and eating habits are shifting slowly onto a meat-free diet. You'll find plenty of vegetarian options. Fortunately, I would say we are lucky. I don't know, James, you can see from your own experience, from the time you've been living here in Malta, we're blessed with a lot of local veg. So produce here is quite generous, and that helps a lot.
And what do you recommend people to drink alongside their meals tonight? Would you have a kind of a glass of wine, or beer, or a soft drink traditionally?
Of course, yeah. Well, we got some wine and even got some beer as well. You have to understand that Malta is a former British colony. So while we have a culture of wine, like all Mediterranean destinations around us, still we like our beer and also our whiskey. So I unfortunately have to say this, we blame the British for that. But there is also a big beer culture as well. Typically, I mean, if you go to the seaside, most people will sure enjoy a beer, a nice cold wine as well. So I think both options would represent a typical Maltese summer.
If anyone else has any further questions, do feel free to drop them in the chat or kind of ask. If there's anything else you want to know about the dishes we're making or Maltese culture and cuisine.
So James, can we continue with the serving of the dishes?
Yes.
So people can get a general view of the end result.
So I think this is the beauty of. This is one I made earlier, because obviously the other one won't look exactly like that. So this is the same pie but with the pastitsi pastry, which we have here. Obviously laminated dough, lots of fat through that.
But the flakiness, of course, gives that texture and crunch. Obviously, this would be something people would prepare in advance, so either in the morning or in the afternoon, and this would be something that they would take off to the beach or for a picnic. Or just to enjoy with some friends. Then we also have the soup, which is boiling away.
Got that there. So as you can see, nice and chunky. You can add some milk to this if you'd like, but I'd like to keep this. Just I feel like you have enough fat through these chestnuts just to hold it all together. So we're just going to finish that with a little bit of freshly topped chive and a touch of olive oil. Just to try and bring some fat, some shine through that. Ooh, there we go.
Okay, and then finishing off our dessert.
Our dessert, Imbuljuta. Got the cup. And just with a little bit of our candied orange on top.
So that orange was basically just boiling in the sugar syrup?
That's it, yeah. You
for like half an hour?
Reduce that water down and let it just gently caramelize in the sugar there.
Maybe a bit of icing sugar on top?
You could finish it with a little bit of icing sugar, George.
Get that winter feel?
Yeah, that's
it doesn't snow here in Malta, so we have to have a little bit of imagination. Huh?
That's it.
Very good. So here we have our 3-course meal. So our chestnut soup, followed by our rice and pumpkin pie, and finishing it off with our baked spiced chocolate custard, which in Maltese we would call Imbuljuta. Not sure if there's any other questions, Alice?
We've just had one more come through, asking what the national dish of Malta is.
The national dish? That's a tricky one. Typically would be the rabbit. So that would be the most common, I would say, the most common thing here in Malta. Now, obviously, some cultures would perceive a rabbit as a pet. But of course, here in Malta or places like France and even in Italy, it was very common. The breeding and cooking and the cooking of rabbit. It is a source of white meat. For us, it's our chicken. If you want to interpret it that way, and it's something that's been coming for a very long time, since the time of the knights. So when Malta was under the Knights of Malta, so the St. John's Hospitaliers, you even had to have a license to go hunting for rabbit, for example. So like places in the UK where they go for fox, or I don't know, places in the US they go for deer. Here in Malta, basically they would breed purposely rabbit. It was against the law to catch rabbit because there would be an organized set season for rabbit hunting. And of course, from that came the tradition of the local rabbit, the traditional Maltese dish. Traditionally, it was the Maltese. It was a rabbit pie, because you have to understand, of course, coming from an island maybe of, let's say, poverty, where with one rabbit you had to feed the whole family. So the tradition was of making the rabbit pie, and that evolved then to our fried rabbit with garlic and white wine, or stewed rabbit and plenty others. I mean, here at the restaurant we try to present the rabbit in a bit more, I won't say French style, but a French style, but basically give it a more contemporary touch, because even the rabbit itself, it's a small animal, which of course quite lean, and of course different parts of it need to be treated in different ways.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, so that's it in a nutshell. Maybe apart from the rabbit, which I think would be more accessible, would be basically the pastizzi, or maybe even the Maltese bracioli, which the Maltese bracioli is what we call a beef olive. So it's a rolled up piece of meat stuffed with pork, egg, and parsley. So I would say that is another thing. But again, that's irony. It's like we're on an island, and these two dishes are actually meat-based when you think about it. And of course, in the summer, of course, fish is in abundance. Tuna, grouper, amberjack, the lampuki, calamari. For example, the calamari here is line caught, for example. So there's plenty of fish to go around as well. But that's something, of course, in the summertime that we celebrate and enjoy.
Oh, there is another question as well. When the pie is out the oven, do you have to wait a bit before cutting into it? What's your recommendations, George?
That is actually a very good observation. Exactly. So obviously, this pie, once it's ready, it will be steaming, it will be hot, so it needs to set. It needs to cool down. Preferably, cool it down maybe for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I would always suggest the time that you've been cooking it for. Yeah. So half an hour is grand, but at the same time, if you're putting that straight on your dining table for your family, I don't think anybody's going to complain if it doesn't come out in nice uniform slices. So
exactly. But then, of course, the cooler it gets, the easier it is to cut it. Yeah. And of course, obviously, if you're taking out for a picnic or basic out to the beach, you're going to be eating at room temperature, actually chilled. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with chilled food. I mean, look at in the UK, for example, let's say the pork pie.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that the pork pie is actually served cold. Served cold, and the same thing with the rice and pumpkin pie. There's nothing wrong with basically that being served cold, or at least at room temperature. So, but for sure, I wouldn't be recommending serving it piping hot. Once it's out of the oven, it's gonna collapse. So you need to let it set. And cool down.
So there haven't been any more questions, but I think it's because everyone is dying to get stuck into their meals. So we'll be around for a few more minutes, won't we, in case anyone kind of has any other questions or feedback. But everyone's been saying how amazing their food looks in the comments, so I think we should let everyone get off and enjoy. But yes, thank you all so much for joining us and cooking along. Really hope that you enjoy your food. Thank you so much to George and James for the amazing demonstration. It was really, really insightful, great to learn about kind of Maltese cuisine and the recipes. If anyone's got any feedback or any questions, we'll be around for a few minutes, so do feel free to have a chat.
Yeah, well, Alice, if you don't mind, I just want to point in thank you to everyone for your attention. I hope you found the time with us interesting. For us, it was fun and interesting too. Yeah. Interesting experience. What do you think, James?
Very interesting experience for sure.
Going virtual. Of course, we're going to end the evening with a bit of wine.
Lovely. Good stuff.
And hopefully this will help the tension calm down.
Yes.
No? What do you think?
It would be lovely.
After all the cooking.
That would be lovely. Yeah. And get stuck into this food.
Exactly. For anyone still watching, of course, we're going to serve some local gelosa. So here in Malta, we have 2 indigenous grapes. One is white, Gargantina, and fancier red. It's the Maltese gelosa. very similar, in my opinion, in profile, like an Italian Primitivo or a California Zinfandel. There you go, James.
So, thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers, George. That's one.
And thank you, everyone.
How do you cheers in Maltese, George?
Cheers. Well, we'd say bisaha, with health. Bisaha. So bisaha, everyone.
Saha.
But we like to say cheers too. So I'm very sorry, Alice, that we can't share the food with you. I'm very sorry about that.
I know, I'm starving from looking at it. We've had someone in the comments is going to enjoy their food with some limoncello. Is that quite popular in
Yes,
Malta
yes,
as well?
yes. I mean, limoncello is something Italian, but even here in Malta. I mean, here in Malta, citrus, due to our proximity to Sicily, orange and then lemon was a common crop here in Malta. So we do have some limoncello production here, but obviously we can't call it limoncello in Malta. It's called limoncello. Here in Europe, there's a lot of how I'm going to say, on protection, on status, on how to call things and where they come from. So here in Malta, it would be called limoncello and not limoncello. Okay, so I think we're off, ready to sign off.
That's it.
Anyway, good luck to the year ahead. We hope it's safe and healthy. And we hope maybe we'll have the opportunity this summer to host you here in our little home in Gozo.
Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
See
you
you.
so much. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye bye.